All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar on Adventures in Change Management, getting everyone on the same page. My name is Beth Rugg from Ithaca College. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for SIGUX and will be helping to facilitate this webinar. Greg Stauffer is a PR and communication professional with the Office of Information Technology at the University of Colorado Boulder. Greg has over 18 years of experience developing and executing strategic communication plans for small to mid-sized companies, specializing in everything from consumer packaged goods and recreation to community development and education. Rochelle Scott is also on the webinar, and she is the Assistant Director of Communication, Web, and Documentation in the Office of Information Technology at the University of Colorado Boulder. In this position, she leads strategic and technical communicators, creative professionals, web developers, and outreach coordinators in an effort to provide meaningful information about IT at CU Boulder. But before we jump into the webinar, let's just go over some basic rules of the road. By default, everyone is muted. When you have a question or comment, please use the chat feature and send a chat message or question to the organizer. That's me. And I'll make sure that I let Rochelle and Greg know that you have a question. You should be able to see the attendees list, and please note that we have provided a tiny URL for this, for the Prezi presentation, and the session is being recorded and will be available on the SIGUX website in a few days. So with that, I'll turn it over to Greg and Rochelle.
Thanks, Beth. Thank you for the introduction. So as Beth mentioned, we are part of a group that includes not only communication and public relations for the Office of Information Technology, but also web documentation and web development. So this presentation is going to come at change management and communicating change from that perspective, the perspective of communicators and those who do web documentation. So just thought it would be helpful to understand that. So before we get into the presentation here, I thought it might be helpful to give you all just a little bit of an understanding of the environment in which we work. University of Colorado Boulder is one of 4 campuses in the University of Colorado system. Ours is the flagship campus, founded, like you can see there, in 1876. It's a Research One university, although I don't think that term's necessarily used anymore, but a lot of what is done on this campus is driven by research. We have a proud tradition of Nobel laureates on our campus, and at any one time there's approximately 30,000 students enrolled in studies on our campus, and in about approximately 150 different fields of study. Our office specifically is the provider, the central provider of IT services and support on our campus. We have approximately 180 full-time employees and also a good number of student employees. And something that's rather unique to our campus, I think, is this concept of having departmental computer support liaisons in every school, college, department across campus. So they are often very helpful in relaying communication to their departments about what kind of changes are coming, and also helpful in relaying information about projects, like I say, changes, services, that sort of thing. So that group is used quite extensively for helping us communicate. I should mention one of the things that I find hardest in doing a webinar is not having this face-to-face and two-way communication. So please, if you have questions at any point throughout, feel free to present those in the chat feature, and we'll get right to them. So that's a little bit about the environment. This is our campus. Whenever we show or have a presentation with folks from outside Boulder, we have to have the gratuitous campus shot here. And right in the middle of this picture there is where we have our kind of customer-facing presence, and it can get a little bit testy and when there are changes that haven't been well communicated, and we start having to support customers and who didn't know that a change was on its way. So the next thing I wanted to do was talk and kind of define what changes are. We used ITIL as a basis for creating the change management process for ourselves. And ITIL defines change as being approved by management. It is implemented with a minimized amount or an accepted risk. Again, that risk being accepted by everyone in the organization. And this change will result in the status, a new status of a configuration item. That's ITIL speak there, but a configuration item could be a service or a piece of that service. And lastly, it provides increased value, and that value can come in any way from increasing revenue, avoiding cost, or improving a service. I think we usually find that our changes are improve service and maybe also avoid cost or increase revenue. So that's kind of a definition of change. So let's get a little bit into what change looks like. Before we had a change management process on our campus, change was chaotic. It was very stressful. It was confusing not just for us, but for our customers as well. Any number of these words can kind of describe the change. I liked this picture that we had of the fish jumping from bowl to bowl, because you can kind of feel like when you're part of this change, whether or not you're the implementer or the person communicating about it, you're out there on your own. You're not sure whether or not you're going to be successful, and you're leaving everyone else behind. So what we're trying to do is get everyone here on the same page. So all right. So before we had, again, we had really no consistency in our communication about change, or in the way that we internally understood changes. Oftentimes these things were hidden from the light, intentionally or sometimes or often unintentionally. But when you're uncertain about the change and you're not connected to your coworkers and the folks that this might affect, it makes for a lot of uncertainty about the change. Also, probably not unlike a lot of your institutions, our IT department was very siloed. There wasn't a lot of information sharing, and we're trying to get to a place where we have more of that information sharing. I think that a lot of that has come through looking at this change management process and implementing a change management process. And then when it comes to expectations and setting those for our campus, we were unable to set expectations amongst ourselves for this, much less with our customers on campus. So I think one of the important things that we realized and our customers realized was that when we didn't communicate about a change, it was often the assumption that something was broken or it was unplanned, what was an outage. And so that affects our reputation, and we wanted to make sure that this communication about the changes were coordinated and people understood what was coming and understood the need for once in a while taking down a service so that we could do updates, patches, and that sort of thing. Some other reasons that changes often weren't communicated amongst ourselves within OIT was that folks thought that maybe there would be no impact from the change. Once in a while we hear that this is a service that no one uses or no one seems to care about anymore, so it's really not an impactful change. Other reasons were that the change was done during non-business hours or nobody thought anyone would notice. But we increasingly find that folks depend on our services almost 24/7. And so this concept of things being done outside business hours becomes less and less of a reality, and we have to, again, think of our services and our support as being 24/7. So just to give a little illustration of what change looked like before we had a change management process, we made this little video. So hopefully that gives you a little sense of what a communicator has to go through when a change is not planned and there's not good lead time coming up to the change. We kind of had a fair amount of, like I've said, a fair amount of inconsistency in the way, not just which we communicated about changes, but in which different departments or units within the Office of Information Technology dealt with changes. Some would try and communicate them on their own, and others would reach out to us days before or hours before the change, and then in some cases we would not even know about it at all. Just one really quick story. We had a change that involved a certificate change, and afterward it was realized that this change then required an acceptance of a new security key for folks. We actually communicated about the change, but didn't know about the acceptance of the key, and so there were some kind of quick emergency communications out to folks about the key, that yes, indeed, you had to accept this key to kind of move forward and log into this service. So that kind of thing was really endemic of the change process, or the lack of change process that we had at the time.
Greg, we do have a question,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you want to clarify it now or later, but the question is, how is impact defined?
That's something I was just going to get to here in just a moment. We've got a couple slides here, and we'll address that. So good question.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to now let Rochelle take over at this point. Rochelle?
Thanks, Greg. So Greg's done a pretty good job of demonstrating the chaos that we used to live in, and it was truly a bunch of silos, like he said, really going through and making changes, and we just didn't know much about it, and we had to always communicate at the very last minute or after the fact. I think our organization recognized that, and the first thing that we really did was we agreed that we wanted to adopt an ITIL framework. And so that we had sort of been dabbling in ITIL, learning more about it, reading books, and we decided to start taking that kind of seriously. And when you begin to engage in the process, one of the first things that it talks about is developing a service catalog. And the service catalog really helped. It was surprising to a lot of people, but it was actually a challenge to create the service catalog. We thought we knew what our services were, but so many of them sort of came out of the shadows a bit, and it was really a good surprise, and it helped us get on the same page. So once we had established a service catalog, it allowed us to really start thinking about what are the service level agreements on each service? Should we create consistent maintenance windows across sort of categories of service like networking? And then that helped us really have the right conversation. It wasn't an unexpected change on a Saturday morning. We knew that networking was going to happen on Tuesday and Thursday mornings between 5 and 6 a.m. And then probably the most important thing we did to sort of prepare ourselves for really taking change seriously is we assigned a change management process owner. I think without having someone, the change guru as we call him, without having somebody be truly responsible for the process, it would have been one of those good ideas, yeah, let's all sort of, do the right thing and do change. I think we had even attempted to do that for a while, but it wasn't until we really had somebody on our staff who was devoted to this, who could follow through on this, and make this happen that we went from sort of good intentions to actually executing on an idea and a process. So, to get on the same page.
Rochelle, I'm sorry, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
How long did it take you to develop a service catalog?
That's a great question. So, we've actually made a couple of attempts at this before. That first real attempt took, I would say, and this is almost embarrassing, but I would say it took 6 months of like a weekly meeting amongst these directors who would go and get lunch at the same time. So maybe that's why it took so long, because I'm sure they were having a good time too. But they would basically sort of sit there, and as they would represent their areas, it took a long time for them to do that. We've actually just recently gone through this process again, and we've made it even better. And I would say that project had a resource that works 1 day a week. She was sort of devoted to that, and I would say it took another 4 or 5 months to really go through and check and have service owners identified. That's one of the things it didn't have previously, and to then really build out the details of that catalog.
Thank you. And we do have a few more questions from folks on the webinar, so let me just, are you okay if I kind of throw those out at you now?
Absolutely,
or?
yeah.
Okay, so do you have a dedicated service management team or office?
What we have today is it's kind of like that. We have a really dedicated, strong PMO, project management office. And within that, we have some of our ITIL processes. So the service catalog, round 2 process that just happened was managed under that office, as well as the change process comes from that office. And we are starting to do an inventory of other sort of ITIL processes that are out there that we want to formalize better and sort of centralize. So we strongly use our project management office.
Great. And I think so what team is the change owner on? Is that then the project management office?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Do you have a job description for the change guru that can be shared with the audience?
We do, I imagine. I will get in touch with the assistant director of the project management office and get that out to you, Beth.
Thank you, and I'll distribute it on the SIGOX website. Does the person, the change owner or the change management process owner, have other roles within the organization?
Yes. So one of the things that the change manager did is he had worked here for a long time in kind of various roles that were process-oriented. So it was a natural fit for him. He had also dabbled in project management. And so at the same time, while we were picking a ITSM tool and we went through the process of selecting ServiceNow, he was really important in that process and kind of facilitated that. So he had really dug deep within ITIL and basically understanding process and wanting to implement it. Today, I would say when he started as the change manager, he had to spend a lot of time to get that off the ground. And so he was probably a little bit more dedicated to that, and he had his work kind of rearranged. These days, he handles the change process, and it probably doesn't take him a ton of time on a weekly basis. He's always sort of doing continual improvement with it, but he also then now serves back as a project manager on other projects.
Great, thank you. I think
Sure.
Those are all the questions that have come in right now that got answered.
Okay.
One point of clarity is that the service catalog is not a kind of a one and done kind of thing. It's not like making a catalog if you're a retailer like Eddie Bauer, for instance, but it's an iterative process, and we're always updating that catalog, and we have someone that's kind of driving that process with the service owners. So. All right, I think we're ready to move to the next slide.
Yeah, so to get on the same page, we recognized that we needed some tools, and we also needed to formalize some processes. We did two things. The first thing is we created a change advisory board, and this was a really important thing. It was about getting the people that had an impact on services in the same room once a week. So we do this to this day every Tuesday at 4 o'clock, and we decided that we just wanted to be together so we could highlight the changes that were happening and just have awareness about them. To base our meetings, we developed a change management website where we had people fill out a form to enter their change, and that really guided the meeting. So we had something to look at, something to go through, and within that form it asked questions, and we'll get to that a little bit later about the kind of risk and the impact and reasons how it's going to be implemented. But we based our meetings off of that. And then within that, we're still sort of immature in this process in the sense that we don't necessarily approve changes or approve them far enough back that people don't, then go and investigate a change. That's a really mature way. What we wanted to do in the beginning was at least understand the schedule and the impact and get in the room and discuss it. And that seemed to be so important because what we recognized was the sort of collective knowledge really improved our change success. There have been a few instances, it happens every now and again, where something is scheduled and from the technical lead's perspective, who it might be a little bit more isolated, they feel like that was a good date, sort of fits in a service window, but what we recognize is, hey, you can't do this to our exchange service, for example, if there's a football game or something else that might impact it, or we have two conflicting changes. So that's where we probably do our best work to change dates and find a better time, and everybody gets on the same page. So like I said, that collective knowledge really has made it been the greatest benefit of this. It's no longer something that's in the dark, and that is what really has made this be what it is and gets us on the same page. So the other thing we did, from a communications perspective, this was very important for us, was to create a consistent process and one location where we would post to the campus about upcoming maintenance and upcoming changes to services. So we did this on our website. We call these service alerts. And service alerts serve in two ways. One, they are for unplanned events, for things that go wrong, but then also for, like I said, the scheduled maintenance. And earlier Greg talked about how we have these department liaisons who also help spread the message. For service alerts, you can obviously go and look on our website at any time if you're curious if something is down. But you can also subscribe to service alerts, and they get pushed out to you via email. You can also subscribe on RSS. But we've automatically subscribed all of our liaisons, so they always get the messages. Another thing that we do is we send a weekly message to those liaisons to sort of round up all of the upcoming maintenance. And that has been a big improvement with our, I think, relationship with those liaisons, especially the IT practitioners who are out there really trying to support people in departments. They have a good understanding of what's coming, and they are very rarely surprised or taken off guard or anything like that.
Rochelle, this is Beth. We do have another question. How do you get all of the critical dates so that the changes are not stepping on important events like football games?
So we do a couple things. That's a great question. We do a couple things at the beginning of the meeting. Our university has a really thorough events calendar. So does our facilities management department on campus. They have a calendar that we can look at. Our system office, UIS, University Information Systems, that also does IT things, they have a calendar that we can access. And we are always looking for more opportunities to find calendars. We recently realized we should look at financial aid. We did a change recently where we thought we knew everything there was to know about it, and what we didn't realize, there was a scholarship deadline that impacted incoming students, and we had taken the service down. So we're now basically looking for input from other departments, and we partner with them to get an idea. So at the beginning of every meeting, we go through the calendar, and we have we look at it all. And I think the change process manager, he does a more thorough job of looking at that and identifies problems. He reviews the changes before they come in so that we don't have to spend too much time. Believe it or not, our change meeting is 30 minutes, and we stick to it pretty decently. So that's how we do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think next we're going to talk about the change parameters. This was a question that came up earlier. How do we define the changes? And the changes, the way they are defined for us, there are kind of three major factors that also figure into our communication. First of all, we want to know what the risk of this change is, the risk of interrupting the service. And we rank that in terms of being a low-risk change, a high or a medium-risk change. And something to point out is that although we record all of these changes within our website, as we get together as a CAB, only discuss those changes that are high-impact changes. Those ones that are low-risk changes or medium-risk changes, unless there's some special extenuating circumstance, we generally only discuss those high-impact or high-risk changes. But at least everyone has exposure to and can read over and see those other changes as well. Secondly, we talk then about the impact. Who is this going to affect? Oftentimes changes can be localized, but more often than not, they impact a large audience on campus, and so we want to understand that and communicate about that. And lastly, and I think this is really important from a communication standpoint, why are we making the change? Too many times our customers get frustrated if there is not some sort of reason communicated behind the change. Are we doing this to, again, increase the value of the service? Will it make the service more robust? Will it bring savings? That's very important, not only to communicate within the organization, but across the campus, so folks understand what kind of values resulting from this change. And now we have a little peek here at what that change management website looks like. So you can see there that we have everything from the change type, low, medium to high, what time this change will take place, when it starts and when it ends. And in some cases, we actually have emergency changes that have to be implemented very quickly. But then if we jump into one of these changes, you can see that we want to know who the change implementer is, who is the person who is in charge, what services this will affect, a description of the change, and then the duration, the impact of this change, and the approach that will be used for implementing this change. Now, a lot of this information is information that is something that we review internally, but a lot of it also is information that we can pass on to the campus, particularly in terms of the services affected, the impact, and the duration of the impact. So this information, that change guru is someone who drives these change implementers to make sure that they provide complete information about all of these different facets of the change.
Greg, we do have a couple questions.
Sure.
How many changes do you typically process in a week?
You can help me out with this here, Rochelle. I've been less involved with changes lately, but we usually talk, I would say, about around a dozen to 2 dozen changes, because we're looking not just at the week upcoming, but oftentimes 2, maybe even 3 weeks out. Is that accurate, Rochelle?
I would say so, and then we usually, I would say roughly it's like 4 or 5 changes a week that we implement during like spring break or winter break. When the campus is less busy, we will pack more in.
And then we also try to have times where change is only necessary. We only implement a change unless it's absolutely necessary. Say during particularly sensitive times, like say finals or the first week of classes, things like that.
Of those processed or proposed changes, how many are approved?
I would say nearly all of them. It's just about the timing. At this point, like I mentioned earlier, we're not quite as mature as we probably could be, where we would really say, yes, you can do this, go forward and investigate that change and make it happen. By the point it gets to the meeting, the director or the senior manager in that area has usually sponsored the change. And so it's probably going to happen for very good reasons. I think we've had a couple instances where we maybe decided not to do it altogether, but mostly it's about the scheduling and the timing and giving us enough time to communicate it and understand the impact.
Great, thank you. And right now I've got 2 more questions. Who are the change implementers? Are they IT staff that represent other committees?
The implementers are generally, not the service owner, but the person who's going to be on site making that change. I don't know if that answers that question. It is someone who deals day in and day out with that service generally.
Sure. And Diane, if that didn't answer your question, just keep typing in and we can clarify. We have one more question. Do you collaborate with other departments or schools? For example, can other IT groups on campus running IT applications widely used on campus, like the library, leverage your change management website and communication paths?
Do you want to take that, Rochelle?
Sure. Thus far, we haven't really collaborated with other IT groups on campus where they've been able to use our tool. I think going forward, one of the things that we're going to do is probably integrate this with our ITSM tool ServiceNow, and we may be bringing more people into that tool across campus so they might be able to use it. But one of the things that we have done on a smaller scale is someone from our university communications who does websites and is a service owner for our web environment now attend our change meetings. We occasionally have people from facilities management come and attend our change meetings. That has been very helpful. So I think all are kind of welcome to come and join us. We haven't yet extended it for other people to use the tool themselves.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions that have come in so far.
Okay. One more point of clarification. This change management website where I just showed and is on the screen right now is helpful in so many ways, that particularly from a communication standpoint, that we're all working from the same record. What used to happen before we had this resource often was that the implementer of the change would contact myself or another communicator to tell us that this change was coming, and then there would be a series of conversations that would happen either via email or phone or in person, and none of this was collected and then kept in one place for folks to understand what was going on. So that has been a huge part, I think, of getting everyone to sing on the same sheet of music and have all of this here as the one record. That's been a drum that the change guru is beating all the time. So that's our process in a nutshell, and the results, as you can imagine, have been just overwhelmingly good. And again, like Rochelle has pointed out, we're not in any way masters of this. I think our process is still improving. We're, as she mentioned, going to put our changes into our ITSM tool here very soon, And but some of the things that have happened is that we've been able to define the expectations amongst our customers on campus, and the coordination that has come from this, not only with campus but internally, so that we understand impacts, and that has been something that's come out of this process. There's been a certain amount of synergy too, I would say. But originally, when we started the CAB meetings and this kind of exposure of changes, there were some folks that were pretty reluctant to come to the table. But I think now we have very active participation, and people understand the importance of these CAB meetings and making our changes transparent and communicating all that we know about them. We've become much more consistent in the way that we execute changes and communicate about changes, and so we're able to set expectations with our campus community and build a certain amount of trust. And I think everyone in the end is much more happy as a result of these changes. It's never easy to make these changes, and certainly we want to have our services be available. But when we know when the change is coming and what to expect, we can kind of work around that. So lastly here, we had another little video to kind of demonstrate what change looks like now for us. I'm going to try something here. We have, although this is a silent movie, we have a little soundtrack in the back that I'm going to try and make it so that you can hear it. So that's our presentation. As Beth mentioned, the presentation is available online for you to look at if you want to at this tiny URL on the page right now. And we're happy to take any more questions you have.
Greg, we have one question right now. Do you post any change review, especially for changes that cause subsequent problems? If so, how do you do this?
Do we communicate about that to the campus? Is that the question, or do we?
It's probably related to if a change doesn't go as expected, maybe what do you do, and then, yes, do you communicate it with the campus communicator? So any post-change review process.
Yes, there is post-change review process in those CAB meetings, and yeah, that's something that if we have to do a new change, we will communicate back out to the campus about the need to do a change again, or try a different approach.
Yeah, I would say that's been actually another great benefit of those meetings is after the change we go through them. 99% of the time we hear that it was successful, and if something did go wrong, it's almost an opportunity for a lessons learned in the moment, where we can go from there and decide if we need to evaluate what went wrong further and really change something about what we do.
Great, thank you. There was another question, but I think it just got answered, and that was, have you yet developed a method for collecting or reporting the outcomes of implemented changes? And I think you just answered that. I think there might be a few more questions coming in. Did implementing change impose challenges with existing culture?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was one of the things I was trying to express, is that there were some particularly implementers, those who had to make the changes, that were a little reluctant to come to the table to make changes. But I would say, by and large, that reluctance is gone. Folks have seen the benefits of getting together, discussing these changes and the impacts, and people are much less reluctant to come to these changes. I think a lot of implementers felt like many of you, as you're looking at this, thinking, do we approve changes? And it's not so much about approving the changes, because the CAB, before that CAB meeting, the right players have gotten together, talked about this change, and their the manager in that line of reporting has approved the change, and so it's more just about reviewing the impacts of the change and making sure that, that it's not stepping on any major event on campus, for instance.
Great. We have a question about the relationship of change to the configuration management. Do you have a CMDB in place, or can you talk a little bit more about what that relationship is?
Take that one. You want me to?
Yeah.
Today we don't have a central CMDB in place. It's one of our goals as we continue to improve upon our ServiceNow instance. So we started this without that. Now there are some pockets within OAT that have that internally already, so that helps them, and thankfully it's like the really technical operations groups that do. But overall, we still need to create one, and I think that will have an impact on change. And furthermore, that's why we're going to be migrating our change into ServiceNow so that it can connect with that.
Great, thank you. I personally have a question that might be just a little bit different. So this is obviously documenting technical service change. Do you have any experience with or how does your organization handle organizational change? So it's not really related to a technical service, but it's more related to organizational changes. Do you have any centralized process for that?
We never change.
Not sure.
You want to talk about that, Rochelle?
Sure. Today I would say no. Or in the past several years, I've worked here for a long time, so has Greg. Changes have happened very differently through different leadership groups. And, you know, we've had bad times and good times through that. One of the things that we've adopted and we're working through right now is a model called Business Performance Excellence. And that has really helped us as an organization adopt more objectivity and more process around management, coming up with strategic plans, and empowerment of employees. So that doesn't exactly contribute to how changes are implemented here on an organizational level, but I think there's more openness now and less just doing something because you feel like it, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you. And that was Business Performance Excellence?
Excellence, and I can send you a link to that too.
Thank you very much. I'd appreciate that. Another question.
One of the outcomes of that business process excellence process is that we have proactive and reactive surveys with our customers, and so I think a lot of the changes that have happened now have come more as a result of direct feedback from our customers, whereas before it wasn't necessarily customer feedback that we were reacting to, or it wasn't necessarily understood in a collective way across our organization as to why the changes were happening. But I think these days it's much more in tune with our customer needs.
Well, and this question might lead into that just a bit. Can members of the community request system changes, or are they all IT implementers? A follow-up, is there a separate process for end users to request changes?
I would say not completely. One thing we do have today is a governance board called CCITP, and the people that we've identified as liaisons across campus, if they are IT professionals for 50% or more of their role on campus, they're invited to come and be a part of this governance board. And through that, with our CIO, they get to sort of be in the discussion and really be there and give suggestions and guidance, as well as maybe request things. That gets heard and digested, and we follow up on that. So that's usually the process. And then Greg is absolutely right with the proactive survey that we send out each year. We base our strategic direction off of that. So if we recently learned that they would like to see a service improvement in one of our major services, so we created projects based off of that and are meeting with smaller groups to really learn what that means.
Great, thank you. Last call, any more questions? Well, I don't see anything coming in, but I really appreciate your time, Greg and Rochelle. I think this is really interesting and informative, and I know by the participation that people are very interested in this topic. As I mentioned, this has been recorded, so it should be available on the SIGUX YouTube website within just a few days. So thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, thanks.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.